Hey, I'm Dan from RV Leaguers, and this is Reels on Wheels. Today we're talking about Avengers Endgame, but before we get into it, I want to say thank you for checking out the Reels on Wheels Movie Club. For those of you who don't know what that is, I'm choosing one film a week to watch and dive into. I announced the movie of the week in advance so you can watch too, and I'm hoping to kick off a discussion by sharing my thoughts. For more, you can check out my prior posts. The links are in the description for No Country for Old Men and A Streetcar Named Desire. I've also put a link in the description for the written full review of Avengers Endgame, but I'll be covering most of that in this video. Avengers Endgame has captivated audiences all over the world, living up to overwhelming expectations and smashing box office records. The film crossed the $2 billion mark in just 11 days and already passed Titanic to become the second highest grossing film of all time, and it's setting its sights on Avatar's all-time record. And with 21 prior films leading up to this moment, directors Anthony and Joe Russo, collectively known as the Russo Brothers, faced the behemoth task of bringing the Infinity Saga story arc to a close and wrapping up the storylines for several of the MCU's most beloved characters. To accomplish this, they crafted a movie running just over 3 hours, accommodating both epic blockbuster sequences and quiet character moments. The film masterfully balances the MCU's now marquee blend of action, comedy, drama, and heart. In my written review on our blog, linked below in the description, you can see a full plot summary if you need it, but I'll save the time here and just get right into my review of the film, assuming most of you have seen it. But again, if you need that refresher, you can click in the link below and check out the full plot summary that I put together. There is so much to say about this movie. It succeeds both for casual and die-hard fans of the franchise because it pays attention to characters, their relationships, and emotions. It delivers epic action and is certainly one of the greatest blockbusters of all time. It's also long. The film adds about a half hour to Infinity War's runtime, but it's not bloated. It uses that additional time to explore our characters more deeply. The film resonates because we are emotionally invested in these characters. We care what they have to say to each other over a peanut butter sandwich. We care about their infighting. We care about them dealing with and overcoming resentment. Our heroes are human. We see them get torn down, struggle to cope, move on in some ways, and ultimately triumph. I don't think we'll have a film that creates this type of global moment again for a long time, and it is completely earned. It delivers on every level. It achieved the gargantuan feat of fully capturing the essence of the Marvel Cinematic Universe in one astonishing film, and in doing so, it has cemented itself in cinematic history as one of the greatest of all time. Now, to get into a little bit more detail about the film, I'm going to go through Act 1, Act 2, and Act 3, and talk a little bit about what each one does. First, setting the stage, Act 1. I've seen some describe the first act of the film as slow, but I think that misses the point entirely. First of all, the Avengers literally decapitate Thanos in the first act, so it still has action. But more importantly, it lets us see Tony grapple with his own death and failure, see Steve and others at a support group dealing with grief even 5 years after the snap, Natasha struggling to keep doing her job and hold the team together, Clint going off the deep end after losing his family, Thor's descent into depression and alcoholism, and even small moments like that one between Nebula and Rocket. We need to feel the effects of the snap before embarking on a time-traveling adventure, or else the dramatic end of Infinity War would be entirely undermined. We see 5 years later slowly appear on the screen, but we also feel the years through our characters and their stories, especially in this first act. Devoting significant screen time to these moments and establishing the post-snap world as the new normal allows the film to distinguish itself from Infinity War and stand on its own. Yes, it's a follow-up, and yes, it's entirely premised on the events of Infinity War, but it doesn't just feel like picking up where we left off in Infinity War and completing that story. In a way, the first act actually delivers that immediate follow-up that audiences might have expected relatively quickly. They find Thanos, they kill him. That's it. But they fail again because the stones aren't there, and they can't do anything to save the dead. That closes the book on Infinity War. Thanos won, period. To reverse it after 5 years have now passed pushes our heroes to their limits and asks them to make compromises and trade-offs. Where in Infinity War we hear them say, "We don't trade lives." In Endgame, the stakes are higher because the gloves come off and everything is on the table, and that is all established in this first act. The film also boldly commits to the character decisions it makes in this first act. It's fairly clear that Thor has had the most trouble in the aftermath of the snap. What at first might just seem like a quick gag to show an out-of-shape Thor turns out to be what we get for the entire film. This allows them to show him grow as a character and rise up out of this slump to fight Thanos again. He doesn't just magically get abs again. We don't need to see a training montage of him getting into physical shape. It's more important that we know where his head is at, where he's at emotionally. The film focuses on that journey, his journey to overcome intangible issues, to be the hero he truly is, regardless of his outward appearance. Now, moving on to the Time Heist, Act 2. This is the crux of the film. While many of its most epic moments come in the climactic battle later, the events in and around the heist are at the film's core. Our characters come together to plan the heist at the Avengers facility, providing some of our best interactions, like when Thor hilariously recounts the events of Thor the Dark World while everyone else looks on really confused. We even get small things like a shot of Natasha, Hulk, and Tony lying down in the office brainstorming in sweats. That's when Natasha realizes that 3 stones were in New York in 2012. It's small moments like these that make the characters feel more human. Yeah, that's what it's like when you're doing a group project and you're just trying to figure something out and put the pieces together. Everyone's just sitting around in their sweats working out the problem. The film also completely commits to the heist. We get the music, the sneaking around, the costumes, all of the hijinks you look for in a fun heist. But we also get moments only the MCU has earned, like having Captain America fight himself and admire his own America's ass. The heist also allows our characters to revisit their own past and deliver emotional closure, some of which we didn't even know we needed. Notably, it deals with parental closure for both Tony and Thor. Tony's strained relationship with his father has been visited before in the MCU. He never got closure before his parents were murdered by the Winter Soldier, and his father was very distant with him growing up. He finally connected with his father in 1970 when Howard was the soon-to-be father. Tony now has his own daughter and could see that his father was apprehensive and nervous about being a good dad. He could relate to him. This showed him that for all his faults, perhaps his dad was really just trying his best. And Tony was finally able to tell him that for all the bad, he really only remembered the good parts. His goodbye hug may have perturbed Howard a bit, but it gave Tony the chance to connect and finally say goodbye. Similarly, Thor's mother was taken from him too early in Thor the Dark World in 2013. This was one of a string of failures he internalized that drove him to his downtrodden state. Admittedly, most people don't look fondly on Thor the Dark World, and we did not really emotionally invest in Thor's mother, probably because she had very little actual character development in that film. But here we see how big of an absence she's really been in Thor's life. When he's finally able to talk through all of his misadventures and failings with her, she's able to comfort him and lift him up out of the doldrums, and he too is able to get closure by saying goodbye. And before he goes, he summons Mjolnir, and his face, when his hammer returns to his grasp, says it all. In spite of all of his struggles, he's still worthy. Meanwhile, Cap sees Peggy Carter once again, and he's reminded tangibly of the life he'd given up when he went into the ice in 1945. We can feel how desperately he wishes to have had his life with her, and it pays off later. And even characters with no prior history are developed in relation to each other. One great example is Rhodey and Nebula. When her arm is burned retrieving the Power Stone, her robotic arm is revealed. She is visibly uncomfortable, saying that she wasn't always this way. Rhodey replies, I wasn't either, but we work with what we got. This little moment of comfort says a lot about these characters. It shows how even two seemingly dissimilar characters can still connect on a human level. It's amazing that all of this character development takes place in the midst of the exciting fun of the Time Heist. It would be easy to get lost in the action of the primary events, recovering all the Infinity Stones through a series of mini-adventures, but the writers and directors never lose sight of the characters that underpin the story. It's why the MCU has connected with audiences where other blockbuster franchises have faltered. And you simply can't talk about the poignancy of the Time Heist without talking about Clint and Natasha on Vormir. This is the end of one of the original Avengers, and it's the moment when the film commits to the idea that the stakes are real and lives will be lost permanently. What's quite beautiful about it is that the love between these two characters isn't romantic, but a deep friendship and shared history that binds them to each other. Both are willing to make the ultimate sacrifice, but this is Natasha's moment to save her family. As she said before, she had nothing, and then she had this family, the Avengers, and she would do anything to save them. Her sacrifice is the boldest and bravest because she only has faith that it will work. She can't even know for sure. While it would have been awesome to see her in that A-Force female superhero team-up that comes later, we'll never forget her sacrifice on Vormir. It's at the heart of the emotional impact of the Time Heist. On to the final act, putting the end in Endgame. This climactic battle is absolutely one of the most epic sequences ever put on film. The big three, Iron Man, Captain America, and Thor, face off against Thanos. Captain America wields Mjolnir. The Avengers, all of them and their allies, assemble, and Iron Man wields the gauntlet, giving his life to finally save the universe from Thanos. And amidst all this, the directors did a great job of not letting the battle get away from the audience. One great tool was the Infinity Gauntlet relay race. There's a lot going on once the big battle breaks out, but by focusing in on the gauntlet and having individual characters carry it, we can focus in on them in particular so that it's not just 40 minutes of CGI characters punching each other, even though that's still kind of fun. Needless to say, the movie delivered here. This was not just the climax of one epic film, but an entire story arc that spanned over a decade. It rose to the occasion, not just by its scale, but also by its significance to the story. All of the Avengers, anyone willing to come in and fight alongside them against Thanos, come together, and we finally have a moment worthy of the iconic line from Captain America, "Avengers Assemble." But more than that, it closes a story arc on Iron Man, the most beloved character in the MCU, and now one of the most iconic characters in the whole world. Fittingly, the story comes full circle as he declares, like he famously did at the end of Iron Man in 2008, "I am Iron Man." We've watched Tony grow as a character over the course of these films, from a selfish billionaire playboy to a selfless hero willing to put it all on the line to fight the greatest threat in the universe. And not only was he willing to do it, he was also capable. He figured out time travel. He built a gauntlet and a suit capable of wielding the stones, something we saw required special skill in Infinity War, and he was able to wield them all to defeat Thanos and his army. Having completed his mission and protected the world, he could, as Pepper said, finally rest. It's very difficult for a franchise to end, or in this case, end its most beloved character. Endgame managed to do so in a way that was emotionally resonant. The audience can mourn with the survivors, but also celebrate Tony's ultimate triumph over his greatest foe. And our last big send-off, which was not in death in the same way, but similarly fitting, was Captain America. He finally got his dance with Peggy, that life that Tony had told him to get. We've seen Steve give up a normal life so many times over. The soldier, always standing up for what is right, even at great personal cost. He was just a simple kid from Brooklyn who didn't think it was right that others were laying down their lives in World War II while he stayed behind. And from that humble origin, he has grown to face threats both in personal relationships, like with Bucky and even Iron Man, and cosmic, like facing down aliens in New York and Thanos himself. He's been the man out of time all along, and in many ways, he's been the man out of his depth, but he's always risen to every occasion. Finally, after their final battle together, he says goodbye to his friends, those he lost in Natasha and Tony, and those who remain in Bucky and Sam, and returns to Peggy to live a normal, quiet life. It was beautiful, he says. He doesn't tell Sam or the audience about it, but all we need is that intimate moment of him dancing with Peggy to know that finally our captain can rest too. So we're closing this chapter in the MCU. We've said goodbye to many of our favorite characters, and this felt in many ways like a true ending. There wasn't any mid or post-credit scene, just the sound of Iron Man hammering away at his original armor. A full circle. Of course, Endgame isn't the end of the MCU. The latest Spider-Man trailer just dropped, and we will see how the universe expands and deals with new threats to come. But Endgame closed the loop on a massive, unprecedented cinematic storyline. It did so not by resting on its laurels, but by once again thrilling audiences with something new and exciting. It's a film that stands out with other epic conclusions in the same vein as Lord of the Rings: Return of the King, but it also sets the stage for what's to come. And while it may be many years before we see this or any franchise crescendo so beautifully, we can't wait to see what's next. But let's get down to business. We've talked about Endgame a lot, we've seen it multiple times, everyone's talking about this movie, but how does Endgame stack up against the rest of the MCU? This is an incredibly difficult decision. As many of you know, I have ranked the entire MCU before. You can check out those videos. I'll put the links in the description below as well. And I can say from the start, I know Endgame is in my top 5. But that's where it gets tricky. My immediate reaction after seeing this film on opening day in IMAX was that it was vaulted into the top spot. But I wanted to be sure that it wasn't just recency bias. Now, over 2 weeks since seeing it for the first time, and after having seen it for a second time, I can say confidently that it still stands apart. It is the epic, expansive grand finale. It pays off on storylines that we have all followed for over a decade and lived up to insanely high expectations. It created a cultural moment all over the world as audiences rushed to theaters to share in this once-in-a-generation experience. This film is something truly spectacular and special. It is the very definition of the MCU. And for that reason, I am dethroning one of my all-time favorite movies, Captain America: The Winter Soldier, and I am giving Endgame the #1 spot in my MCU ranking. Now, if you want to see more about how the entire MCU stacks up, like I said, I have videos up on our YouTube channel talking about every movie in the MCU so far, so be sure to check those out. I'll put links in the description below, and you can also check out our blog posts at rvleaguers.com. I'll include some links below to those as well. But those are my thoughts. What did you think of Endgame? How does it stack up in your MCU ranking? I've seen a lot of rankings floating around now that the MCU has kind of closed this chapter, so let me know what your thoughts are. Let me know in the comments here, and always feel free to reach out at RV Leaguers on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. I want to say thank you again for checking this out, and be sure to come back next week for more Reels on Wheels. Stay tuned for the announcement of this week's movie of the week, although we are seeing Avengers Endgame again. But don't worry, we're going to do a new movie this week, so I'll be announcing the movie of the week in the next couple days. Stay tuned, and don't forget to like and subscribe and hit that bell for more Reels on Wheels and RV Leaguers adventures.